Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are for our next lesson of our JLI course, Sinai and Civics. And if you look at the beginning of the course on page 29 in our books, it says like this: Lesson 2, the roots of equality. In the modern world, the value of human equality is almost taken for granted. But it wasn't always this way. This lesson traces the surprising path through which the Torah's radical vision of human equality changed the world. And the introduction to the lesson can be found on the next page, on page 30 in our books, where it says, in our previous lesson, we discussed the Jewish influence on America in general terms, learning how the founders of America, as they embarked on building a better society in the New World, viewed their project through a Jewish biblical lens and sought to emulate the Torah. Today, we will turn our attention to a specific, fundamental American value and explore its Jewish roots and meaning. Let me open up the slideshow. Ladies and gentlemen, Sinai and Civics, the roots of equality. So let's talk a little bit about the early United States of America and the colonies, which were dependent on Great Britain in many ways. Certainly, they were subordinates to Great Britain, and there were taxes and there were restrictions and there were all these things that made people very unhappy, as we know, until finally on July 4th, 1776, 250 years and 5 days ago, the founding fathers of this great nation declared their independence. We behold these truths. We, right? Accept to be self-evident, etc., etc., etc. And they declared their independence, as the Declaration of Independence says. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. And those rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, now, that's very interesting, ladies and gentlemen. That is the founding of the United States of America. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nהיה b'dvaro. L'chaim. Now, a question for you. We are going to read a fascinating myth recorded by Plato called the Myth of the Metals, famous thing. And we're going to look back to the ancient Greeks. And we know, this is very, very important, ladies and gentlemen. We know how important the Roman Republic and the Greeks were to the founding of the United States of America and the idea of the Republic and the idea of liberty. And many of these ideas that we have in our society come from the Greeks. In fact, we had a fascinating I had a fascinating discovery, which you probably know already, but I did a little bit of a research thing a couple of months ago. One of my kids at school was learning a lot about the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans in their history class. And I found that very interesting because in our history curriculum in South Africa, when I was a child, the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans were not an important part of our classes. And it was fascinating for me to see that here in America, clearly the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans are a major part of what they have to learn about. I'll give you an example, is when we did Shakespeare as a kid, we'd read Macbeth, and we read A Midsummer's Night's Dream, and we read a couple of others, but the school was supposed to teach us Romeo and Juliet. The teacher wanted to do Romeo and Juliet, and one of the parents complained that they were doing such a romantic novel with yeshiva boys, so they scrapped Romeo and Juliet and did something else instead, and I can't remember at the moment what exactly it was. I still think that's funny, but anyway, exactly, whatever it was. I understand. Maybe those people are still fighting to this day. Anyway, but one of I think my daughter Chayla, when she was studying for her regents in New York, they studied Julius Caesar. And again, it's about the ancient Romans, and a lot of American kids study this because the concept of whether or not someone is the role of a king versus a republic, which is at the center of that play, wasn't really such a big deal in South Africa. In other words, what I'm trying to say, so I did some research, is this just South Africa? And then I saw that in Europe, actually, in classical history in England, for example, they don't focus on the Greeks and the Romans as much. In other words, the notion of this version of history where you focus on the republic and the importance of a republic and the tyranny of an emperor, which is at the core of how Americans learn history, is a particularly American angle on looking at the world. So I'm saying all this because I'm bringing us back to the Greeks. And then you go to Washington, D.C., and you see Washington is built with the buildings are Greek revival buildings, right? And this is the New Republic. And that's part of the architecture and the ethos and the mythology of this country. Now, at the same time, America's not fully based on the Greeks, because we will see in today's class that there's a heck of a lot of Hebrew Bible in America. In fact, maybe that's the key founding idea, not the ancient Greeks as much as the Hebrew Bible. And that's going to be an interesting thing that we're going to explore in today's class.
Which is never mentioned in any.
So it's very interesting because the Hebrew Bible is not mentioned in our history. And what's happening right now is in Texas, they have just passed a law to read Bible passages in school, because they're saying that a good American kid needs to be knowledgeable in Bible, even if it's just as a book of literature and mythology. They should be reading this stuff. And of course, and whether they're reading New Testament or Old Testament, they can argue for either one. Remember, these are Protestants, so they do Old Testament. They don't only do New Testament, they do Old Testament. But I can see how many people are going to be, I can see how this can become a very dangerous thing in the United States of America. So then we got to go to what are the important values in America? How important is separation in church and state? And we have to ask ourselves a question, a very, very honest question. And this is a hard question, okay? Which I'm going to just pose as a question, because I'm not going to spend the day on this question today, but I just want to pose it as a question. What is a greater threat in this country today? Too much religion or too little religion? So there have been times, so when I grew up, when I was a child, whenever religion came up and different religions came up at the Shabbos table, my father always ended the conversation. He didn't end the conversation, but he always would say, he would quote the famous Irish philosopher, Jonathan Swift, who famously said, "We all have enough religion to hate, but not nearly enough religion to love." And that's something very important, that religion can be a force of tremendous hatred in the world. And historically, religion has been, in many places at many times, a force of tremendous negativity in the world, and there needs to be protection from religion for the citizens, and nobody knows that better than the Jews. At the same time, state-sponsored religion can be a very, very dangerous thing. At the same time, history has also proved that radical secularism, for example, think about communist Russia, radical secularism can also be a tremendous, tremendous threat to its people, right? So the question we have to ask ourselves as citizens, and this is not an easy question to answer, okay? And I think and the question is, are we as a society more threatened by religion or lack of religion? as a society? And I'm just putting it out as a question. I don't really want to spend the whole day on that question. Of course you can.
Because religion, I think of all the different ways that people have concept of a divine being bigger than themselves. And there are many different interpretations of God type universe. So the word religion seems so narrow.
Okay. I understand. I understand. The word religion can be very narrow, and there's a lot we can say about that. But still, nevertheless, still and all, I want to ask the question: are we in America? Are we at a place where there is too much religion or too little religion?
The leaders have too little.
So Elaine says the leadership has too little religion. So we have to think about. So this is an interesting question. Are the and well the
reflection of a lot of people.
so it's a question. Maybe there was a time where we needed more protection from religion. Maybe now's the time when we need more religion. I don't know. I'm not here necessarily to answer the questions. I am here to ask questions today about this particular issue. I'm posing a question. Okay, I'm going to let you guys discuss it at home. However, so we've spoken about the Greeks and we've spoken a little bit about the Hebrew Bible. Okay, I'm going to throw in one more thing. It's not essentially part of the slideshow today, so I'm going off the slideshow for 1 second. Instead, I'm going to YouTube. No, I'm not. I'm going to JLI. I'm going to my web browser. What's this thing doing? There's something in the chat. I know what it is. It's not for us. Nicht für uns, sagt man auf Yiddish. Let's go share and let's go to this page over here. And let's go to myjli.com/SAC. Oh, that didn't work. Lessons.myjli.com/SAC, which is the site for the additional lessons. And let's go to lesson 2. And this video was played in a previous JLI course. This was made for a previous JLI course called Wrestling with Faith, but it's a good intro to today's class as well. So I'm going to play this video because I like videos. Videos are good. Videos are entertaining. I mean, not always. I know. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You're the best. You're the best. They probably are. Here we go. I'll be right back.
It is taken for granted in today's world that each individual, regardless of the many characteristics that distinguish humans from each other, is entitled to a basic set of considerations known as human rights. In fact, much of our public discourse is a conversation over the definitions, limitations, and applications of the ever-evolving concepts of equality and freedom. But where did these rights originate? By what authority are they binding? The answer takes us back to June of 1215 on the British Isles. Upon the green grass of a water meadow just 20 miles west of ancient London, a tyrannical monarch sat humbled. King John of England had demonstrated such cruelty and arbitrary justice that the English barons rose in rebellion. There, among the meadows of Runnymede, a compromise was signed, and its effects are felt louder and more happily today than at the time it was inked. The agreement was later named in Latin Magna Carta, or the Great Charter of the Liberties. It opens with a revolutionary statement of freedom. To all free men of our kingdom, we have also granted, for us and our heirs forever, all the liberties written out below. On that day, the idea of the law standing above the government was written into a contract. King John accepted that he would no longer get to make the rules up as he went along. In a bold quest for fair treatment, the Charter invented rights such as protection from illegal imprisonment, access to swift justice, and limitations on taxation. These expectations were renegotiated over the centuries until they came to sudden and full bloom 5.5 centuries later. It was not British barons this time, but the colonies of North America that conspired to remove the shackles of the British monarchy. The founding fathers of the United States were also motivated by the pursuit of basic rights and freedoms. Their underlying outlook, however, could not have been more different. The barons believed that God gave a monarch full ownership and control over his subjects. Therefore, the Magna Carta's revolutionary granting of rights was in fact just another royal decree. The king was ordering that his subjects be granted certain considerations. The founding fathers, on the other hand, believed that God created humans to be free altogether and perfectly equal. This meant doing away with the monarchy and ruling classes of privileged elites. The 1776 U.S. Declaration of Independence argued that by virtue of being born a human being, an individual is entitled to a set of considerations at the hands of fellow humans. According to this perspective, human rights are not negotiable. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So free did God create humans, argued the founders of America, that any form of government is an intrusion on that freedom. It is only because a complete lack of authority would invite anarchy and jeopardize everyone's human rights that it is necessary to establish a governing entity to safeguard those freedoms and rights. This, and only this, is the purpose of government. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Freedom and governance is a perpetual tug-of-war. In order to ensure that the government serves the people, and not the other way around, the American vision calls for limited governmental powers to the minimum necessary to ensure a safe and sane society. And very importantly, before setting up a people's government, America's fathers stipulated that if any government begins to infringe on human rights instead of protecting them, the American people must replace the government and rethink the form of leadership. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Having retreated some 800 years to review the origins, context, and underlying principles of modern law and the rights it seeks to protect, why don't we stretch back further in time, say about 2,500 years before the Magna Carta, to the abrupt emergence of an entire body of laws, not in a green meadow, but in the sandy desert of the Sinai? What are the underlying principles of the Torah's laws? What rights, if any, does the Torah bestow?
Cookies, anybody?
Yeah, they look smell pretty beautiful. You did good.
Thank you, but that was great yourself. Well, yeah. Yeah. And there's plenty there if anyone wants a second of yourselves.
How about them using, our leaders are using the Christian religion and twisting it around to use it to hurt people.
But you
Okay,
know what's interesting, it just occurred to me listening to this, that even the idea of majority rule comes from the Hebrew, from the Torah.
so. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to explore lots and lots of things. What I'm going to do now, though, is go back to the slideshow. Okay, so we've spoken about the Magna Carta and English common law, and how English common law is devised and is founded on this principle of the rights of kings, right? And that may be limited by the will of the king in the situation we said. And we also spoke about the American ideal, But we haven't spoken so much about the Greeks. I mentioned the Greeks, but let's read from the Greeks. So let's read from Plato for a second. And there's this fascinating text we have in our books on page 33. And this is Plato's myth of the metals. All of you in the city are brothers, but the God who made you mixed some gold into those who are adequately equipped to rule, because they are most valuable. He put silver in those who are auxiliaries, and iron and copper in the farmers and other craftsmen. For the most part, you will produce children like yourselves, but because you are all related, a silver child will occasionally be born from a golden parent and vice versa. So reading this, ladies and gentlemen, some questions. The first question on the screen is, does this myth align with American values? Does this reflect the United States ideas in the Constitution that some people are born golden, some people are born with some silver, and some people were born with copper? Does this sound American or not so American?
Very American right now.
It sounds American, like really, this is what the Constitution
Yes,
says.
the Constitution.
What does the Constitution say? What is the preamble of the
That all men,
all men are created equal, right?
yes, they're created by God.
Yeah, but equal and the same are two different things. So I would question, is this myth talking about, it's not necessarily saying that gold and silver are not equal.
Well, it
It's
says
saying
the
it's
gold,
different.
some people are born to be rulers.
Oh, well, true. Yeah.
Some people are born to be auxiliaries, and some people are born to be farmers.
Okay, so that
And
is-
occasionally things will switch around, but not usually. For the most part, you'll produce children.
It does
So
not-
it doesn't, huh?
It does not align with American
It
values.
doesn't seem to be a perfect. So we're seeing that if you go back to the Greeks, you can go back to the Greeks in certain ways, but not in all ways, because certainly ancient world was not, especially the Greek world, was a very hierarchical world. Now, here's an interesting question. Does this myth reflect the animal world and nature? That it's hierarchical, that there's some species at the top, some in the middle, some at the bottom of the food chain?
Yeah.
It does.
Yes.
So it's quite a naturalist view of the world. It's interesting. It's interesting that if you take a purely biological view of things, somebody was talking about Nietzsche the other day and his concept of an Übermensch, right? You could see the Nazis having a view like this. It definitely aligns with racial theory, which is antithesis of America.
They still call the black people, what, apes or something?
Whatever, I don't know who does, but they shouldn't. And this is the antithesis of the idea that all men are born equal. How might it reflect the Greek myths of the gods, of multiple gods warring with each other? Any thoughts on that?
There is hierarchy in the myths of the gods, so I would say it aligns with the myths of the gods.
And men over women.
It could be that too.
But-
If there's, in other words, if you have competing gods and a hierarchy of the gods. See, the fascinating thing is many gods are created from looking at nature and believing there's a spiritual source for each thing individually. So then the weak gods become the rulers of the weak kingdoms on earth. The strong gods become the gods of the strong, right? And that's the way it all becomes. But this is not obviously a Jewish concept. And the Jewish concept, and it's also not an American concept.
Yeah.
So that is a fascinating thing. So in ancient Greece, you had a hierarchy of gold, silver, iron, and copper. And it was a locked system, and basically it was what it was. And if you were born into the right family, you could make progress. And if you weren't, you weren't. And occasionally you would have some social mobility, but it wasn't really built into the ethos of the country. And the effects of social hierarchy, what happens is the people at the top believe they're born to rule, and they abuse their power, and they abuse the powerless. And this leads to inequality before the law. And one of the great and fascinating societal impacts of this is these societies never developed universal education. Because why should you educate the masses? It's only
You don't want to.
you don't want to educate the masses.
It's trouble.
And I grew up in South Africa, where this type of thinking was at the core of the way people did. It was rampant. It was an apartheid system. And one of the important things in apartheid is they didn't educate people. I mean, they claimed to educate, but they didn't educate anyone. So, what does Judaism teach? Page 35 in our books are the most important lessons in Torah. Comes right from the description of creation in the image of God. And God created the human in his image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. And the Lord Jonathan Sacks, the Lord Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Sacks, explains, page 36 in our books, the Jewish Revolution. This is from another one of his books than the one we read last week. This is from his book, Radical Then, Radical Now. He says it. A sentence was uttered that heralded the greatest paradigm shift in the story of mankind. So God made man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. This single proposition was an explosive charge at the base of the entire structure of the ancient and medieval world. It took millennia for its potential to be realized. But once stated, the rest was inevitable. From it would flow the great ideas that changed the West: the sanctity of human life, the dignity of the individual, human rights, the sovereignty of justice, the rule of law, and the idea of a free society. Nothing could have been more counterintuitive. That kings, rulers, emperors, pharaohs were the image of God, that much the ancient world knew. But that we are all, that we all are in the image of God, that was revolution. And it's no coincidence that they came out of Egypt, which is a society which is still famous for its pyramids, only to come into, right, which shows a pyramid reflects a hierarchical society. The pharaoh at the top and the masses of the slaves at the bottom. To come to the desert and receive the Torah from God at Mount Sinai, where he affirms the principles of the Torah, which declares that all humans are created in the image of God. Any questions or comments?
No, in fact, that female was created from the rib of Adam, I guess, they're equal. Man.
So that's a fascinating thing, that there's this whole dynamic right away in the beginning of the Torah, Adam and Eve, and the roles of males and females, and absolutely this is a key Jewish value, that all people are created equal.
So how does this tie in with the developing Jewish society of slavery?
So that's a very, very interesting question. And it's a very important question we have to address in this class. The question is, Bob asks, how does this relate to and tie in with slavery?
The Jews had slaves.
Yeah.
They didn't say
Jews had slaves in Israel.
they did.
And Jews had slaves in other words, 2,000 years ago and 3,000 years ago, there was slavery. And Jews owned slaves in the South. I mean, and the question the question, of course, always becomes about America is how do you have this Declaration of Independence saying that all people are equal and at the same time have slavery? And the question becomes about Judaism. How can Judaism be so pro-equality and so and at the same time allow for slavery? And that's, I think, Bob's question. It's a very, very important question. So there are many different answers to this question. The best answer that resonates for me is an answer that was given by Jonathan Sachs as well. And he says, and he points out, there's been no document as important for abolitionists as the Hebrew Bible. And there is no document that is as denouncing of slavery as the Hebrew Bible. Because the whole main narrative of the Torah is about the exodus of the slaves. And one of the fascinating things is there's been almost every oppressed people in the history of the world, ever since the Hebrew Bible, has seen themselves as the Israelites coming out of Pharaoh's slavery.
Go down.
So in America, you have the Negro spiritual, go down Moses, as a reflection of that, right? So in America, the African Americans, the slaves, were the Jews waiting for their liberty. Before that, the Puritans were the Jews who came here for their liberty from the oppressive regimes of Europe. In South Africa, the Afrikaners first saw themselves as the Jews escaping their tyranny of the British. And then the Africans, the black people of South Africa saw themselves also. Nelson Mandela was their Moses. And you have this fascinating dynamic, but all turn to the Bible, to the Torah, because while the Torah does allow for slavery, it's clear the Torah doesn't like it.
When you say it allows for slavery, is it written?
Wasn't it usually not forced slavery also with the?
So here comes an interesting question about the rules of slavery within the Torah. And I'm not going to be able to spend all day on this.
Yeah.
But there is a notion about the Torah. And I would say the same thing applies to America as well, which is that once Jefferson and the founders, the framers, whoever it else was, wrote this Declaration of Independence declaring all people are equal, it was just a matter of time until the slaves would be freed. Mm-hmm. In other words, the principles had been declared, the economics took time, the economics took time to catch up, and the people took time to catch up, right? The people took time to catch up, but the value of it had been declared. And we probably have a similar thing in Torah, that the Talmud actually says that a Jew has to treat his slaves so well that anyone who acquires a slave is as if they acquired a master. In other words, first came the proper treatment of slaves, and then came the abolition of the institution as a whole. So I think, therefore, in other words, to answer Bob's question in summary, I think the answer to Bob's question is that while the economic circumstances of slavery were permitted by the Bible, the general theme, the spirit of the Bible, as well as the main narrative of the Bible, is about the ills of slavery. And I think that message has changed the world. I think that message got through, and that message changed the world, although unfortunately, it took too long for humans to catch up. And unfortunately, too many people were hurt very, very badly in the process. But that's what I think.
In Judaism, were they able to
Much of the
earn their
world,
freedom?
not the whole.
I beg your pardon?
In Judaism, weren't they able to earn their freedom? at some point? Or is that a myth that I have in my head?
There were different types of slavery, different aspects of slavery, different laws of slavery, different ways a slave can go free. There are all kinds of rules of slavery in Judaism. And it's fascinating, and it's something that needs further exploration.
And I
So
think they all had to be given the option of freedom after 7 years, right?
maybe,
Maybe.
maybe.
Like the
Maybe,
Jubilee years.
maybe, and maybe not.
Yeah.
So it's a question. It's a question. We're gonna leave the exploration of slavery in the Torah for now. I think I've pretty much covered the main points. You're not gonna like, if you're an abolitionist, the Torah doesn't go far enough for you. But on the other hand, if you're an abolitionist, you're probably gonna have to admit you're gonna use the Bible as a tool to convince people that the Pharaoh should let the slaves go.
Right.
In other words, because that's really more people know about the Pharaoh story than they do about the slaves verses. I think that's for sure.
Another.
We don't have a holiday celebrating slavery. We do have a holiday where we celebrate the freedom of the slaves. Okay. You can get exercise again when he gets up. God created humanity in his image. And here Rachel alluded to this before, that a essential idea in Judaism also is that while we are all created in God's image, we're not all the same. Every individual is unique and special. Page 37. Over here, we're going to read about what the Talmud says we can learn from the fact that God created one human being in the beginning, a human created in the image of God. We've got some fascinating things we can learn from this. Number one, so Talmud says, page 37, this is a straight up quote from the Mishnah. Initially, only one human being was created to teach us, that one who destroys a single life is considered to have destroyed the entire world. And one who saves a single life is considered to have saved the entire world. A person every individual is equal to all of humanity. That's an incredibly, incredibly important principle. The idea, this establishes the value of an individual. Now, you'll remember that in communist Russia, the individual is secondary to the society. In Judaism, the individual is equal to all of society. Society is not more important than the individual, and no one individual is more important than anyone else. It's an incredibly important concept, an establishment of the concept of individualism. Number two, knowing that we are all created in the image of God maintains harmony among humanity. That one person would not be able to say to another, my progenitor is greater than yours. My ancestor is greater than yours. I've got better lineage than you do. What are you talking about? We all come from Adam. Number three, so that heretics should not say that there are many gods, each creating its own line of humanity. No, we don't all represent different gods and different things. We all come from one God. And finally, number four, to communicate the greatness of God. For when a person mints many coins from the same mold, all the coins are alike. But God mints every person to the mold of the first human, and yet no two people are alike. Therefore, every person must say, the world was created for me. And that doesn't mean for me to exploit. It means for me to take responsibility for. Because Judaism is not, and this is a very important one of the, we often talk about this in the philosophy of law, that while the American system is built on a system of rights, the Jewish system is built on a system of responsibilities. Beautiful. Beautiful. And that's a big difference, because it's not about, ask not what the world can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country or for the world. Ask, right? We're here with a mission.
Yeah.
For the world. So the world was created. The world was created for me to elevate, perfect, and bring more godliness to it. So looking at the slides again for a second. I don't know what the harmony, so this leads to, like we said, harmony among people. The idea that if you save one life, it's like you save the entire world. And every person to say the world was created for me to be able to elevate and bring more goodness to. And this also is important to the idea, this idea of all of us being created in the image of God leads to greater human dignity. The Torah mandates respect for every human being. And now we can read a fascinating debate in the Talmud. The great Torah principle. The first paragraph over here is one of the most famous phrases in all of Torah, in all of Talmud, in all of Jewish thinking. Page 40 in our books. V'ahavta l'reacha kamecha, Rabbi Akiva Omer, zeh klal gadol b'Torah. You shall love your fellow like yourself. Rabbi Akiva said, this is a great principle in the Torah. Love your fellow as you love yourself. This is the great principle of the Torah. If you want to sum it up in one line, says Rabbi Akiva, love your fellow as you love yourself. Ben Azai said, we quoted this in other courses, Ben Azai said, the following verse conveys an even greater principle. This is the written account of the descendants of Adam. When God created Adam in the likeness of God, he created him. That man is created in the image of God. So the Rabbi Avram ben David, the Raavad, one of the great classic commentaries of Torah from the 12th century, commented on this debate between Ben Azai and Rabbi Akiva. And he says like this, page 41 in our books. From the verse, we only learn, from the first verse, you shall love the Lord, you shall love your fellow as you love yourself. From the first verse, you shall love your fellow as you love yourself. We only learn to love another like yourself. Thus, a person who had been shamed, cursed, victimized by theft, or beaten might think that it's permissible to allow a fellow to be similarly shamed, cursed, or beaten. Treat others like you have been treated. Unfortunately, that's what happens, by the way. And the abuser, the one who was abused, becomes the victim becomes the abuser. Because people think that's normal. If I went through it, then others should go through it too. I remember when one of our kids was very, very little in preschool, they slapped another kid. Can you imagine? One of our little kids slapped the kid and was like, oh, we were young parents and the teacher called us in and told us, and we were horrified, and we spoke to the child. They asked the child, oh no, the teacher asked the child. The teacher told us the story. We weren't horrified. The teacher told us the story. Let me tell you the story. The teacher asked the child, why did you do it? The teacher was very amused by the answer. So they asked the child, why did you slap the other kid? So our child responded, because they wanted me to. So the teacher said, why do you think they wanted to? So our child responded, because they hit me first. And you don't do to others what you don't want done to yourself. So if they did it to me, it's because they wanted it done to them. If they did it to me, it's because they wanted it done to them. Unfortunately, it's a child perspective, but unfortunately, it's a very, very deep psychological thing with trauma and with abuse. That very often the victim becomes the abuser because they get trapped in the cycle of
Right, it's okay.
treat others like you are treated. If you get stuck in a world where treat others as you are treated, then it leads to a cycle of abuse.
Or you let yourself continue to be.
Or you allow yourself to continue to be abused, or whatever it is. It creates these interesting and terrible cycles. But so Rabbi Akiva says, love your fellow as you love yourself. Ben Azai says that doesn't go far enough. Ben Azai says, that's a person, so the Ravid explains, that's a person who had been shamed, cursed, victimized by theft, or beaten, might think that it's permissible to allow a fellow to be similarly shamed, cursed, or beaten. Therefore, the Torah says, in the likeness of God, he created him, as if to say, who are you shaming? Who are you cursing? The image of God. Thus, this verse is a greater principle than the first, says Ben Azai. Ben Azai says, no, it's not how you were treated or want to be treated that defines what's right. You're dealing with the image of God. It doesn't matter what you want or think is okay. It's what God wants and thinks is okay. That should be the gold standard for human behavior. Very deep. So we have Rabbi Akiva who says, love your fellow as yourself. Ben Azai says, the deeper principle is the verse, B'Tselem Elokim Nivra Adam, in the likeness of God, he created.
I've also heard it, if I may just, I've also heard it said in the net. I'm not sure if this also.
And there's a famous passage, Rachel is remembering
Yeah.
a famous passage, a famous story that a potential convert came to Hillel. And he said, teach me the entire Torah while I stand on one foot. And Hillel said to him, don't do to others what you don't want done to yourself.
Right.
The rest is commentary. Now go and learn.
So that was Hillel's interpretation of.
So Hillel was actually before Rabbi Akiva. Hillel lived before Rabbi Akiva. Hillel lived about 100 years before Rabbi Akiva. So the analysis of the difference between Hillel and Rabbi Akiva is a fascinating analysis that we're going to save for another day. But it's interesting. Hillel stated it in the negative and associated with don't do others what you don't want done to yourself. He said it that way. And that way, at the very least, you've got to, what you don't like, don't do to others. Rabbi Akiva said it in the positive, love your fellow as you love yourself. Maybe that's what Ben Azai was concerned about. It left more room open. Maybe there's a reason. The Alter Rebbe, very important here, in Tanya, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, the author of the Tanya, explains in chapter 32 of Tanya, which is 32, is the gematria of the Hebrew word leiv, which means a heart. At the heart of the Tanya, he says that if a person realizes that we have within ourselves an absolute soul of Hashem within us, that's the true me. That means that you have the same thing in you. So love your fellow as you love yourself means recognize that my soul comes from Hashem and is one with Hashem. And your soul comes from Hashem and is one with Hashem, which means of Echad L'Kulanu, we all have one Father. We're really siblings. We're one with each other. We're interconnected with God and with each other. When I hurt you, I'm hurting myself. When you hurt me, we're all one and in this together. And that explains what Rabbi Akiva is thinking about over here. So there's a lot, ladies and gentlemen, we can discuss about these principles and these verses, and we will come back to that. But let's talk about some of the practical things. We said when you use the Greek myth of the coins, is that what he called it?
Right.
Myth of the
metals.
If you have the myth of the metals, you land up with a hierarchy and an inequality before the law and abuse. But with the Torah principle of all men being created equal, B'Tselem Elokim Nivra Ha'adam, man created in the image of God, this leads to an equality before the law. And the Torah says, of course, that rich and poor before. That brings us now, ladies and gentlemen, to a video about how all these ideas made their way into the United States of America. Fascinating video for today.
Right at the beginning, the Torah teaches that every human has inherent value. Each person is created in the image of the divine. Not just kings, not just nobles, everyone. It was a radical idea in the ancient world, and it remained distinctly Jewish for millennia. Christianity absorbed many Jewish concepts, but for centuries, this one didn't become a central defining doctrine. So how did the ancient Jewish concept of human equality become a cornerstone of modern Western political thought? Enter John Locke, the 17th century English philosopher whose foundational work, Two Treatises of Government, challenged the divine right of kings, one of the dominant political theories of his day, which claimed that monarchs derived their authority directly from God and were not accountable to their subjects. To challenge that idea, Locke reached back past centuries of European political thought and drew from the Torah's account of creation. He argued that equality is a natural, unalterable right established by God at the dawn of time. Human beings, he writes, are all the workmanship of one omnipotent and infinitely wise maker, furnished with like faculties, and therefore there cannot be supposed any such subordination among us. In other words, no person is born with a natural right to rule over another, and from there Locke concludes that no one can be subjected to the political power of another without his own consent. Yechiel Leiter, an American-born Israeli scholar and current Israeli ambassador to the US, has written extensively on John Locke's political philosophy. He explains that according to Locke, the basis for equality is theology, not logic.
And went through the two treatises of government, I found something absolutely amazing. The first treatise, which is almost entirely Hebrew Bible sources, the most quoted source in the second treatise, which is the basis for his entire political edifice, is also Hebrew Bible. Because if you begin your entire philosophical, theological, political edifice with, in the beginning God created, all of humankind are God's creations, then you naturally base the notion of rights on equality. You base the notion of freedom on equality. Man is born equal and man is born free. You have the human being the product of God, if you will. God mixes his labor in creation, therefore we are his. We can't be taken away by an arbitrary and absolute monarch. We cannot have our rights deprived because they are inalienable. I mean, just think about that, the concept of an inalienable right. The idea of an inalienable right comes from Locke because you can't take God's rights away. That's where inalienable right comes from.
Locke's conclusions are the bedrock of modern liberalism, and they come straight out of Genesis. These ideas, radical in Locke's time, leapt into the heart of the American experiment. The founding fathers enshrined his biblical argument for equality as a foundational American value and a self-evident truth in the Declaration of Independence.
If you take a look at the two treaties of government and you compare it with the Declaration of Independence, what you find is that whole paragraphs are pretty much copy-pasted from the two treaties into the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence is a thoroughly Lockean document.
Today's Western idea of equality rests on a Torah truth. Every human being is created in the image of God.
Any questions or comments?
America's foundation is a God we trust.
Well, it's interesting. This was later put on the money in the words "In God We Trust." That was only later, about 100 years ago or so, maybe more, 150 years ago. But that was, but it's true that "God We Trust" is on the money, and there's a lot of obviously, but in the Declaration of Independence, inalienable rights. What's the word? Endowed by their Creator.
There's also a picture of a pyramid with an eye on the money, so that's kind of interesting, isn't there?
Yeah, well, that's a whole interesting thing in and of itself.
Yeah.
Page 44, equality for all. And this later made itself into the 14th Amendment, which has been in the news a lot lately. They don't have the whole quote here, and I can imagine some people would feel there should be more words here, because that's what the whole basis of the last week's lawsuit and legal judgment were about. But anyway, all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens. No state shall make or enforce any laws which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. In other words, the whole concept of equal protection and equality, which is enshrined in the United States Constitution, ultimately comes from the Hebrew Bible, the Torah, which says all men are created
Well, this
in
is
the
being
image
challenged.
of God. Well, it's the court has upheld it, and it's now settled issue, or hopefully forever.
Appeal, Mama.
No, it's the Supreme Court
No.
reaffirmed the 14th Amendment and struck down the challenge.
But they're trying to
And so
bring it up again.
Elaine says
Based on a
that
constitutional
based on the
interpretation. yeah.
Constitution.
Yeah.
Interpretation is the key word.
Exactly.
Oh, well, the Supreme Court, I think, has settled. I think the matter's over now.
I think so.
Well, I think so.
It was a narrow margin though, it was like 5-4.
No,
It was
then it
6-3, I believe.
was
6
4
to
to
3.
6 at the end.
It was
Yeah.
6-3, 6-3,
6 to 3.
6-3.
Yeah, 6 to 3. It's done.
And there were five,
Or 6
one
all.
independent ruling. I mean, but we're not going to go through the machinations of the Supreme Court here and the strengths and weaknesses of the Supreme Court here, ladies and gentlemen. We'll do many, many things. We're here to see the Torah principles and how they've done. The Torah principle is very clear. All men are created equal, and equality is a central principle of Torah. There are no, and the other issues are not Torah principles. Yeah.
I think one of the beautiful things about Judaism, Jews, is that education, because Jews came from all over the world here to America and have succeeded in every field imaginable. And I think it's our value of not only giving back to your society and education and using your education to contribute. And it's just amazing what Jews have done for this country.
It is true, and it is amazing, and it's amazing how well and amazing, fabulous. There's so many things. At the same time, unfortunately, as we assimilate, we're losing some of that spirit. And what we need to do is reconnect to our core values, which is the Torah and mitzvahs and God.
I think our young people are losing them.
I do think so.
You don't think my generation and my children's generation are teaching it.
You never assimilated. You and your children didn't assimilate.
Sure.
The ones who assimilated are becomes harder and harder to distinguish them from one generation to the next. You made sure not to assimilate, that your children wouldn't assimilate. And you gave them,
That's a different issue though. You could, even if you assimilate, you can still contribute and have these values.
absolutely, 100%, and they do.
That's a
But
whole-
over time, if your values, if you lose your Jewish values and you take on universal values, the neshama will always be a neshama. But the traditions and the culture that we think of as Jewish culture can get lost. And we have to make sure that, and Jewish culture doesn't perpetuate itself. Jewish culture will not perpetuate itself with bagels and lox.
Right.
And when I say Jewish culture, a culture of education will not be perpetuated
Yes,
by
we have Jewish
eating bagels and lox.
Of course,
A
yeah.
culture of education will be perpetuated, but by learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. A
Right.
culture of education and of kindness, which is anchored in Torah and mitzvahs, will be perpetuated with Torah and mitzvahs. Bagels and lox is not going to do it. And bagels and lox and schmaltzy Broadway shows are not going to perpetuate these
Of
values.
course, so I think you know, I think we have different, there, not that we have, but some of this discussion depends on how one defines what is assimilation. That's what,
Of course,
you know.
you know, of
very-
course, everything will depend on language. Language is very
Yes.
important, and the way people discuss language
Mhm.
is going to be. But I'm saying if we're not perpetuating our Jewish values,
Right,
which are rooted in Torah and mitzvahs,
right,
then we'll become indistinguishable.
right.
This is what ultimately that's what distinguishes us, is our Torah and our mitzvahs. It's not the bagels and the laps.
No, it used to be Jewish youth groups, Jewish camps. with
But again-
Rabbis and with services.
So when
diminished-
Judaism is at the core of it, it's going to hold. When Judaism is not at the core of it, and this has been something people have struggled with and they continue to struggle. And that's why I'm saying what I'm saying, because I think it's an important principle. If somebody thinks differently, I'm always open to hearing other ideas. I may not agree with them. I may debate you fiercely. I'll try to be nice, but
What?
No, I'm joking.
I gotta be nice.
I'll try to be nice, but I think that this is.
But I think one of the unique aspects of America is that people have been able to assimilate and still retain much of their culture. And-
So,
and
Well, again, it depends on how, that's what I'm saying.
I agree with you.
Define-
So
how you
I
define assimilation, how you define distinguishable.
I agree with what you're saying, Bob, and I'm glad we're having this conversation. This is a very important conversation. So this doesn't mean not. So there's a when I agree with you. In other words, we can be American and we can be Jewish. And we can be Jewish Americans and we can be American Jews. It's all the same thing. I mean, the language distinctions are not so important. Yeah. And we can merge them all together. But if we become American at the expense of Jewish, now you have a phenomenon that's going on in the world right now. Okay. You have a phenomenon that's going on in the world right now, especially there was a New York Times article, I think today, about Rami Emanuel going to Tel Aviv to give a speech where he says that America can no longer can no longer unequivocally support Israel. Okay, so what's happening with him and with others in New York is a lot of people that are distancing themselves from Israel. At other times, people had to distance themselves from Judaism. I was just reading about, well, I was reading something fiction based on truth, but about how they would say in Europe that baptism was the ticket to society or something like that. Any upwardly mobile Jew who doesn't want to get stuck in Europe 100 years ago or 150 years ago would baptize as a way of gaining admittance to society. That was the way it worked. They didn't believe it, but that was what they did. In other words, we haven't been forced in America to choose between Judaism and Americanism in a long time. But there are people that are being put to that test. One of the ways it's coming up nowadays is Israel, or so famously Mayim Bialik, who's an actress, put out a statement yesterday. I can be liberal and pro-Israel. And I can be liberal and Zionist.
Right.
Now, this is all about Zionism, but it's not always about Zionism. Sometimes it's just about, are you about Jewish and American? So it's not that this app that I use, I'm using the free
Yes.
version and they only give you 1 hour. They only give you 1 hour, so we lost the
Rabbi,
purpose.
so Chabad has made an enormous difference in this country and around the world, don't you think? Because you've accepted all Jews, no matter you have.
So God
invited-
accepts all people and realizes that all people are equal and all Jews are equal. And absolutely, and everybody's equally Jewish
And
and
we've grown.
very open, but at the
Keep
same
growing.
time, and at the same time, Chabad is also very clear that we guided by the Torah and the laws of the Torah.
But the
And
thing
it's
about
about another thing.
Zionism and Jewish, it's the same, they're interconnected and people are pretending in order to make it sound acceptable to be, to hate Jews, they're saying, no, I don't hate Jews. I'm just not
I
Zionist.
just hate Zionists,
They're
exactly.
separated, they're making a false separation.
That's true.
Right.
So,
That's true.
American,
So it's an important point. So we're living through a moment in this way, and it's a thing. So the point I'm trying to say is that, of course, we can be American and we can be Jewish,
Right,
and but many people,
and be patriotic and still support the
And support
existence
Israel.
of Israel,
Because-
but Netanyahu necessarily.
fine, exactly, anyway, and you can support anyone you want for president in America, and anyone you want for the prime minister of Israel. It's fine. You can have different opinions. But the main point is that if it comes at the assimilation at the expense of Judaism,
right.
will not be good for America, nor will it be good for the Jew. It won't be good for anyone. And the greatness of America is that in America, it's the one place where we could be Jewish and American in the fullest way.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of pressure in every generation. There's been pressure to hold this together. And in today's generation, there's new pressures and new things that are causing people to want to separate from this. But we have to remain strong and make sure that we don't lose these core principles of
But
Judaism.
again, not to harp too
So
much.
I think we're all on the same page now.
I-
Am I
yeah.
right? Good.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
nice to
no.
be on. It's nice to be on the same page.
Essentially, but
It is.
but
As Jews,
the
yeah.
interesting thing is, even the words being Jewish can and have been defined differently by different Jews.
Oh, yeah.
So what we're saying, what any of us is saying can be like the Constitution can be interpreted in all these different ways.
Right. So
But-
therefore, I have it. Where I come down on this issue
Mhm.
is that the definitions have to be the definitions as they are from Torah, as they are from Halacha, as they are from God, given to us by God and as interpreted through Jewish tradition. Now, there are other people that disagree with me on this. I can't make everybody agree with me, but I do have a belief in what I believe is right. And I can try to convince people, and I can debate it and can do these things, but I'm not sure now's the time or the place, because I don't think we have any major disagreements around this table. I think we're all in this together. We're all in it together anyway. So, ladies and gentlemen, that being said, let's keep reading through the material, and then we'll have some more time to talk again soon.
Mhm.
So now that we know that all people are created in the image of God, sorry, let's go to the next slide. So this idea leads to the equality in America, as we spoke about the path. The Torah says that man is created. Looking at the screen, the Torah says man is created in the divine image. This was adapted by John Locke in his books and made its way into the Constitution with equality and self-evident truths. As for the issue of slavery that was mentioned earlier by Bob, so this is an issue that is true, that how could the society of equality, so-called equality, allow for slavery? It was a problem, but I think we can say that equality was the inspiration for the fight to abolish slavery. In fact, I read recently, and I mentioned this last week already, I read a few years ago a book about Lincoln, and the author of that book, one of the famous biographies of Lincoln, he points out that between Washington and Lincoln, the Declaration of Independence was not it wasn't used as such an important document. Lincoln brought the Declaration of Independence back in his path towards the abolition of slavery. The abolitionists always cited the Declaration of Independence as being a very important document. And it makes sense because there it talks about equality when it came time to drafting the Constitution, while these values were inherently part of the ethos of this country. And many people, I mean, there were people at that time that were not ready to hear this message yet and could not allow this language into the thing. But after the Civil War, the 14th Amendment was drafted, and that's which guaranteed equality. So it all, the concept of equality, but the equality element goes back to the Torah. So it's an interesting thing. And I think
That I read recently, you might not remember either, that oh my God, one of our insane, what should I call them? Far left people in this country has recently, there's a quote where he claimed, I don't remember who it was, which one, claimed that Abraham Lincoln was the inspiration was Hitler's inspiration. It might have been this horrible. I mean, who are these people saying things like this?
It's unbelievable.
If that's what, you know.
okay, so
That makes no
the
sense
best thing to
to me,
do,
right?
I'm sorry you read that nonsense.
I'm sorry,
I'm
sir.
sorry you read it nonsense.
Oh,
Better
okay.
you should be watching the World Cup soccer.
It
It
really looks like.
You know, watch the what was yesterday? There was a game between Argentina played Mexico, and they were 2-0 down, and then they came back and they won 3-2. Wasn't Mexico.
In 11.
It was Argentina versus Egypt.
Oh, Egypt.
Argentina versus Egypt.
Right.
It was they were 3. And you know what the cool thing about watching Argentina come back and beat Egypt? Who cares?
Exactly. Nobody
Just
cares.
everybody. The cool thing about it is like nobody. It's just good fun, and nobody's fighting with each other. We're not fighting with it. We don't even have a stake in this fight. And who cares? It's just pure entertainment, and everybody can get along. And I think it's one of the nice. Maybe one of the lessons we can take from this. You know, one of the nice things about the World Cup is you have these people that, especially, you know, people are coming, everyone's just coming to be entertained and have fun and have a good time from all over the world, whether you're Norwegian or Egyptian or a Japanese or that's okay. You want your team to win. If you're American, you want them to win. If they lose, it's a little bit of a disappointment, but who cares? At the end of the day, it's a game and everybody's having fun. And if we can remember that, there's more that connects us than separates us, would be a much better world. Hopefully that. Okay, the divine image. Where does all this equality come from? Ultimately, the principles of equality stem from the fact that we were all created equally by God. So, what does knowing this do? It teaches us the importance of the respect for individuality. We each have a unique mission in the shared purpose of elevating the world. Page 46 is an important text. If we're created in the image of God, then we have to act God-like. You heard that? It's one of the most important principles of today's class. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to say it again. If we are created in the image of God, then we have to be God-like. What does that mean? The Talmud explains. As God clothes the naked, as it is written, and God made garments of skin for Adam and his wife, and he clothed them, so should you dress the naked. As God visited the ill, as it is written, and God appeared to Abraham in the plains of Mamre, so shall you visit the ill. As God comforted the mourners, as it is written, and it was the passing of Abraham, and God blessed his son Isaac, so should you comfort the mourners. As God buried the dead, as it is written, and God buried Moses in the valley, so should you bury the dead. Just as God did all these acts of kindness, we have to be kind. If God is kind, we have to be kind. God loves the orphan and the widow. We have to take care of the orphan and the widow. Right?
I just remembered it was Mondani's father who said that thing.
Okay, let's move on.
Who is a professor in Columbia. And that's what he's teaching the kids at Columbia. Okay.
I hear you. I hear
Sorry,
you. I
sorry.
hear you. I hear you. I hear you. We've got enough Torahs in the world. I don't need to. I know enough idiots. I don't have to hear about more idiots. Page 47. Huh?
I'm also.
No, it's true,
Beautiful,
true.
this beautiful thing.
I know as God takes care of the orphan and the widow, we should take care of the orphan and the widow. You hear that? We have to be kind, be godlike. It's not so, okay. Page 47. So these are some of the respect of individuality, responsibility. Being created in God's image is more than just a privilege. It is a call to action. Page 47, we should always consider ourselves and the entire world as equally balanced between merit and guilt, says the Rambam. If we perform one transgression, we may tip our personal balance and that of the entire world to the side of guilt, and we bring destruction upon everyone. The real question is not what the leaders are going to do. The question we have to ask is, what are we going to do? Each one of us has agency and has power. Each one of us is created in the image of God. We have the power to bring redemption, bring guilt to the whole world, says Maimonides. Conversely, if we perform one mitzvah, we may tip our balance and that of the entire world to the side of merit, bringing deliverance and salvation to all. This dynamic is reflected in the verse, a righteous person is the foundation of the world, meaning that a person who acts righteously tips the balance of the entire world and saves it. So that is one of the most important lessons of the class.
Lesson
Ladies and
2.
gentlemen,
The roots
summary.
of
Let's
equality.
shall wait until after that helicopter passes so we can hear. I think so. Okay, so the idea is, ladies and gentlemen, if we're created in the image of God, it means we have godlike power in our own lives. This is where we have true agency. This is where we have effect. We spend so much time distracting ourselves from all the things that we need to do by focusing on the nonsense out there. By the way, even the World Cup is a waste of time. Let's go. There's a good story that somebody once came to the Rebbe before his bar mitzvah, and the Rebbe asked him, what do you like? He says, I like baseball. The Rebbe says, tell me more. He says, yeah, I like going to Ebbets Field and watching the Dodgers. So the Rebbe says, what's the difference between the fans and the players? So he said, the fans go home at the end of the day, but the players have to play. They're the ones who have to make it happen. So the Rebbe says, now that you're becoming a bar mitzvah, you're not a fan anymore, you're a player. You're on the field. We have to remember, we're not here to watch other people. When I was a child, we had a principal in high school. His name was Rabbi Chazdan. And he used to tell us, this is what he taught us. This was one of his slogans. He plastered it all over the building at one point, like little posters all over the building. There are three types of people. Some people watch things happen. Some people make things happen. And some people say, what happened? And he said, you have to make it happen. You have to be the kinds of people that make things happen.
But it's also the balance. If you don't have fans, you may not have players.
That's true.
So that's the
Okay, it's
balance
beautiful.
that
Fans are
we-
great. It's all the fans. The fans, it's all good. I love the fans. But we have to be in the game of life, we are the players. In the games, it's more important. What we do this afternoon is more important than finding out what a bunch of people discussed at a meeting at NATO yesterday or today. It's less important because we have more power than they do in our lives.
Right, but I think we also need to see
But we have an
good
upside of
movement.
the media industry is trying to send us back to the pyramid.
Right.
That there's leaders on the top and there's people at the bottom. And Judaism says, no, each one of us is at the top of our pyramid. And we have agency over our lives, and that's more important than not to say that that's not important. And ultimately, as we saw in one of the videos before, is the people have the right ultimately to tell the leaders to go home and to fire them. And I think one of the greatest things in America is at the end of the day, the people get to fire the politicians. And I hope this election, they'll fire them all and bring a whole new bunch. And I don't care, I'm not getting involved. Fire them all. Every single one of them should be fired. Not everyone. If you like some of them, they can keep them. I don't care. I'm not getting involved in who you have to. I'm not getting involved with who you have to fire, not fire. I'm not getting involved. I was joking. I'm not. I'm sure there's a good one somewhere. But there's somebody, huh? But the point is that's the greatness. We're at the top. We're the ones. If you know you want to fire the guy, so you'll take a vote. And guess what? Somebody once, one of the candidates famously said, somebody once called out to one of the candidates, I forget which one right now, and he said, every thinking person in this country is going to vote for you. And the candidate called out, lady, that's not enough. We need a majority. But anyway, the point is, ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't matter. We have been distracted. The media industry that's trying to take all our money and build their own pyramid has to convince us that what they're showing on their screens is more important than what's happening in our lives. Just put away the screens, connect with the people, live our lives to the fullest, and tune out of all that nonsense, tune in to our daily lives. When we can make an effect by voting or getting involved, you want to get involved, get involved. But there are three types of people: those who make things happen, those who watch things happen, and those who say, what happened? And we have to be the first category, the kinds of people that make things happen, which we all are. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, everybody, for being here together with us today for lesson 2 of our 4-part series on the Sinai and civics. We are going to call it a day for the class today. We look forward to seeing everybody soon in good health for our next session. Thank you. I'm going to stop the share and I'm going to stop the video.